Welcome to The Reality Taboo, where no topic is off limits. It's July 25th, 2025. I'm Jeff. Joining me is my co-host, Ness. First topic we're going to discuss is a Wall Street Journal opinion piece dated July 18, 2025. It's titled, "Can It Happen Here? Ask Tucker Carlson." It's by Joel Engel. And the article starts off by referencing the Sinclair Lewis novel from the 1930s, It Can't Happen Here, when fascism ruled Italy and was overtaking Germany. And the thrust of the novel was drawing parallels between what was happening in Germany, and the implication of the novel is that those same kind of things can happen in the United States, and in some sense already were happening. And one of the characters in the novel is inspired by Louisiana's Governor Huey Long. And in the novel, a character promises prosperity to, quote, traditional Americans if they unite against what one character calls, quote, the Jew communists and Jew financiers plotting together to control the country. And I'm going to read from the article. On July 11th, after a day when many of those who identify as America First, or MAGA, were angry over the Trump administration's failure to release the Jeffrey Epstein files, Tucker Carlson offered an explanation to an enthusiastic gathering at the Turning Point USA Student Action Summit. And here the author quotes Tucker Carlson. "It's extremely obvious to anyone who watches that this guy, Epstein, had direct connections to a foreign government, and no one's allowed to say that that foreign government is Israel, because we have been somehow cowed into thinking that that's naughty. There's nothing wrong with saying that," end quote. So the author of this piece, Engel, ridicules the Epstein theory, what he calls the Epstein theory, which he describes as Mossad choosing an American asset, meaning Jeffrey Epstein in this case, who'd been convicted of pimping an underage girl and was supposedly pimping many more underage girls to powerful men to make them susceptible to blackmail. And the author claims that this requires a preposterous belief in some of history's oldest anti-Semitic tropes about the deviously clever puppet master Jew. Then the author later in the piece said, "Never had the United States harbored widespread anti-Semitism of the kind always evident to one degree or another in Europe. It was the one country, the United States, the one country in world history where Jews felt safe." And then the author says, quote, "October 7th changed that. The explosion of anti-Semitism on both the right and left has been terrifying. People who 2 years ago wouldn't have dared declare their hatred for Jews now do so proudly on social media and have plenty of company." And that's what's so insidiously damaging about the claim Mr. Carlson purveyed to his audience that night. These were young people, primarily college age, and they cheered, suggesting he confirmed what they already believe about Israel and by extension Jews. With Epstein as a proxy for Jews, he cunningly changed the subject from his Iran doomsday embarrassment. The author ends his article with, quote, "Because of the fixation on Israel, the Epstein files will remain a cause célèbre, and for as long as they do, Jews hiding behind a metaphorical grassy knoll will be blamed for what's unseen. It's also a good bet that when these files are someday released and dispositively absolve Israel, the truth will be dismissed as one more clever trick of those people." I don't think this article is particularly well written or well reasoned or even original. The reason I wanted to discuss it is because I think it provides a window into a paranoia, a worldview that might be facing existential crisis, a worldview held by a lot of Jews around the world, and especially in the United States and Israel.
There are so many cliches and tropes on display here, from the casual conflation of any criticism of Israeli governmental policy as synonymous with an irrational hatred of all Jews, the idea that is insinuated but that cannot be questioned, which is what Tucker Carlson seems to be doing, is asking, not even necessarily asking probing questions, but just saying that people making potential conjecture should at least be fair game, especially when there is information that was promised to be provided to the public that isn't being provided to the public. But there is that insinuation that everywhere since time immemorial, all non-Jews have been persecuting and prosecuting Jews everywhere for any reason or for no reason at all, and only in the United States for the first time in world history was that tendency arrested for a couple of generations, and now even the United States is no longer safe for Jews. It is the meme about Jews being kicked out of 108 countries so far for no good reason at all, and now this is the 109th that they're going to potentially, or at least that this guy seems to foresee them potentially being kicked out of this one. It just shows a total lack of self-reflection or any willingness to look critically at their own behavior and how it might be perceived by angle as all other people in the world, all non-Jews everywhere. And while I agree with Jeff that it's not a particularly novel article, it is a pretty strong case to be made against the Tucker Carlson MAGA wing of the populist right in America. There is a lot of egg on the face of those who I would characterize as being too credulous about the power of anti-Israel forces in the Middle East. It started most notably over the last couple of years with the claims that Hezbollah was so much more than Hamas, so much more formidable and powerful, and that Hezbollah had capabilities to cause mass devastation in Israel. And that is why, while the Israelis would bomb Gaza into rubble and then make the rubble bounce, they wouldn't dare take military action against Hezbollah. And now that, just 6 months later, sounds ridiculous to say because Hezbollah crumbled and the regime of Bashar al-Assad crumbled, and now Israel has made multiple strikes on Iran proper, and people like Tucker Carlson and a lot of the dissident media like the Scott Ritters have talked about how Iran has the capacity to obliterate major Israeli cities, and yet Israel keeps attacking Iran and violating ceasefires, and Iran does nothing in return. And people like Tucker Carlson did look really silly when they predicted that this would launch World War III.
Yes, it was wise of this author to pick on Tucker for his, I would say, grossly exaggerated assessment of what was happening regarding Trump's order to bomb the nuclear facilities in Iran. I think Tucker Carlson has, at least I can only speak for myself, has damaged his credibility, especially when he's talking about foreign relations. And Tucker has been all over the map as far as what his worldview. He in the 90s and 2000s was a neocon, and to his credit, he has acknowledged that he was wrong about those positions he held. I do think it's convenient for Tucker Carlson. He seems to, whenever he has a big change of opinion, supposed revelation, and he was wrong, all of the decisions he makes do always seem to benefit him financially. So I take what he says with a grain of salt. He's gone after people like Nick Fuentes, accusing him of being a Fed, meaning working for the government, essentially being a charlatan who doesn't believe what he says, and he's just doing it for some sort of material gain or out of some sort of blackmail that the government has on him. When in reality, if you look into Tucker Carlson's background, the idea of him being a Fed is far more plausible than somebody like Nick Fuentes. His dad worked for Voice of America. Tucker Carlson has even acknowledged that he tried to work for the CIA. He comes from a wealthy family. Back to the issue at hand, the allegations that Tucker Carlson is making regarding Jeffrey Epstein being belonging to intelligence in some way, specifically belonging to Mossad, which my understanding is the equivalent of the CIA for Israel. There is a lot of compelling evidence that that's the case, that Jeffrey Epstein was working either directly or indirectly for Mossad. The piece, the opinion piece, also references the fact that Daryl Cooper, a amateur historian, was recently on Tucker Carlson's show. And to me, this is, at least for myself, is a good example of the Streisand effect, which is the phenomenon where an attempt to hide, remove, or censor a piece of information actually ends up making it more widely known, often due to the publicity generated by the attempt itself. Essentially a case of unintended consequences where the effort to suppress something backfires, leading to increased public awareness and dissemination of the very information the individual or entity wanted to keep private. And so I had no intentions of watching the Tucker Carlson interview with Daryl Cooper, partly because of this article and at the advice of my co-host Ness. I did end up watching the article, and it was well worth my time. I thought it was fascinating, and I learned a lot about Jeffrey Epstein and his past, and Robert Maxwell and Ghislaine Maxwell, and how all those pieces fit together. And I'm far more credulous regarding the conspiracy and the idea of what Tucker Carlson asserted, that Jeffrey Epstein was working for Mossad and was running a blackmail operation. I was rather agnostic before, but now I would say I'm a pretty firm believer in a lot of what Tucker Carlson claims. So I don't know if I'm unusual in that sense, but it seems like this whole article could be characterized as the Streisand effect. If somebody who's reading it isn't at least the least bit curious and looks into the things that this author is talking about, looks into those things for themselves, I think they're going to end up believing a lot of what Tucker Carlson said, or maybe not. Another takeaway I had from this article is it seems the author is claiming that the narrative, or people's what people might take away from the truth regarding the narrative, is more important than the truth itself. So what I mean is, to the author, it almost doesn't, even if the allegations against Jeffrey Epstein were true, or if there is credible evidence that they're true, that Jeffrey Epstein is working for Mossad, the harm of people's perception of that reality would be more harmful, would be too harmful to allow that information to be known by the public. And so I don't know if this is a good parallel, but my mind went to, often you'll hear criticism of using mugshots of local crimes, petty crimes, violent crime, robberies, murder, theft, things like that. Because using mugshots, the reality is the 13 to 50 meme is accurate. And so if you're going to disseminate mugshots of local crime, it's going to be disproportionately, overwhelmingly black faces on those mugshots. And so the argument is, even if the disseminating those mugshots might protect people, especially black people, but not just black people, white people, people of all races, the chance that racism would increase as a result of these mugshots, that is too high a cost of disseminating these mugshots.
This is a problem of having cake and wanting to eat it. The complaint is that if people are given the truth, that truth is going to reflect poorly on the way that Israel is perceived vis-a-vis the United States government, and by extension the way that heritage Americans view Jews, and therefore the truth cannot be shared. But at the same time, wanting to know what that truth is, asking for it, in particular after being promised it, is also evidence of a problematic animosity towards Jews. And so the only acceptable outcome from Engel's perspective is that the truth not be laid bare, because, of course, that he almost glosses over it, kind of summarizes it as a throwaway thought at the end of the article. But all of this could be solved by simply releasing all of the Epstein files, which is what the Trump administration campaigned in 2024 on doing, and what multiple top administration officials and the president himself said they were going to do during the first few months of the president's second term. And Engel presumes that the releasing of the files would totally exonerate Epstein and Israel and Mossad, and would reveal this to all be just a series of anti-Semitic tropes. And yet, if that were the case, then of course releasing the files would be the obvious thing to do. But instead, Engel's argument is that they shouldn't be released. Maybe sometime in the future they will be, and when they are, they will, as I said, totally exonerate his side of the argument. But in the meantime, they just can't be released, and anyone who asks questions about why they aren't being released is reviving all of these anti-Semitic tropes that caused Jews to be kicked out of every country in the world except for the United States. There is one aspect of Engel's argument that is relevant for thinking about this broader question. That is where he argues that it's absurd to think that Mossad would choose as an American asset a man who'd been convicted of pimping underage girls and was supposedly pimping more underage girls to powerful men to make them susceptible to blackmail. And this gets to the revelation that Jeff talked about that he had last week with regards to the nature of this high-level blackmail. It is not it's not what people conventionally think of as honeypot operations, where people get tricked into doing something, given to lust, and do something that they know they shouldn't do and would rather not do, but they just give in the passion of the moment, and in the process provide blackmail material against themselves. That would be an instance of that sort of blackmail would be a high-powered executive or a president cheating on his wife with a secretary or an underling. That is not what this involved. These alpha men who are elites, who are some of the most powerful people on the planet, these are not people who are going to just have sex with 12-year-olds wearing braces on some sex island in the middle of the Caribbean that they're flown out to on the plane of someone who it is publicly known is connected to various intelligence agencies and has had a federal conviction with a very light sentence and somehow has access to tens of billions of dollars despite not even having any public records of how he came into that kind of money in an era of KYC and Sarbanes-Oxley regulations that have been in place for 25 years. The idea that those kind of men would fall into that trap against their better judgment, I think, totally misinterprets the way that this blackmail works. And so the argument here that he's making that using Jeffrey Epstein would be a liability for an intelligence agency like Mossad gets it exactly backwards, because he already has a conviction and a very obvious sweetheart deal that got him off lightly, means that he is the perfect conduit for them to use, because they can rely on him to do whatever they need him to do, because he is an easy target that if he turns his back on these intelligence agencies, they have a way to throw him up against the wall in a way that they wouldn't be able to do with someone who was independently wealthy and had gained that wealth in totally up and up legitimate ways.
Ness, my understanding is you don't think Trump is implicated in the Epstein scandal. At least you don't think he had sex with girls under the age of 18.
He may have at some point in his history, but I don't think he would. As Box Day would put it, he wasn't a willing ticket taker. So as I was trying to articulate there previously, it is not that these people stumble into situations and get caught. It is a quid pro quo that they do this thing, they create this blackmail so that they can be controlled and they get a bunch of benefits subsequent. in the case of Trump, I think that is one of the major reasons, going all the way back to 2015, 2016, that they hated him so much, is that they did not have that kind of control that they have on so many other powerful elite players.
So this conspiracy in which people willingly create blackmail for themselves by having sex with underage women, you're saying Trump was, I would say he was certainly made aware of this, or he would have had the opportunity to, as you said, take the ticket, as in enter into this conspiracy, and he chose not to. And I guess I would push back on that or question that hypothesis. I think there is circumstantial evidence that Trump would like to have sex, probably not now when he's almost 80, but in his younger days was interested in young girls, as young as in under 18. I'm not saying prepubescent, but 14, 15, 16, 17-year-old girls. I won't go through all the circumstantial evidence. Some of the kind of weird comments he would make about Ivanka when she was young. I just saw a clip of him from the early 90s doing sitting on a panel evaluating young girls for a beauty pageant. So I don't think it's outside the realm of possibility that Trump, and especially Trump, I would agree, Ness would agree, that he could have had access to almost anyone he wanted, 18 or older. I think the forbidden fruit for Trump, that even his power and wealth and influence would, even with all that, it would still be probably difficult for him to be able to have sex with under 18. And so that's why, and the fact that he was very close friends with Jeffrey Epstein for years, going back at least to the early 90s, a long relationship. So I don't think all of those things put together, and then add one more, all those things put together, I think gives at least strong circumstantial evidence that Trump is implicated or took the ticket, as you put it. One other data point I would give is it was reported recently, I think reliable reporting, to the extent that reporting can be reliable, that the Wall Street Journal reported that in May of this year, of 2025, Pam Bondi had a briefing with Trump regarding the Epstein files, and among other things told Trump that he was named in the Epstein files. Now, again, to what extent he was named is unclear, but I think Trump recently denied that he had ever been told that he was in the files. I think he was lying about that. So I'm not, to me, the best explanation for the 180 that Trump has done recently regarding refusing to release the Epstein files, I think the Occam's razor, the most obvious explanation, is that he did take the ticket. He is implicated in the scandal, and that's why he's not releasing the Epstein files.
So you think for the 5-6 years that he's been pounding the table about releasing the Epstein files, of course, during that entire time, he would know that if that was ever granted, it would hang him and end his political career. And so I don't think that fits with Occam's razor, because that really is like Trump, the 5D chess master, to think that he can play with that kind of fire and keep pushing this thing. Keep pushing and pushing and pushing for this thing that's going to kill him if anybody makes good on the promise, on the thing that he's pledging to do. And even after he wins the election, he keeps pushing. At that point, he could have, if there was some political capital in, or campaign capital in pushing for the Epstein files to be released, then once he gets elected, knowing that it's going to implicate him, there's 1,000 different ways he could put that on the back burner, and it wouldn't have been anything like the story that it's become. But then for the first 3, 4, 5 months of the second term, he continues to make promises about how it's coming, totally unnecessarily. And after building up that crescendo, he then blue balls all of his supporters by pulling it away. Why would he go for 4 or 5 months talking about it if he was just going to pull it away? Why not let it get easily forgotten in the excitement and energy of his first couple of months in office?
Well, if we believe that he was briefed in May of this year regarding the Epstein files, I think it's possible that he's arrogant, I would say narcissistic person. He may have thought there's no way that I could have been caught, or there's no way that I'm implicated in this. And maybe he was shown a smoking gun of some kind, something that he hadn't known about or he had forgotten about, that he thought he could get away with releasing everything and he would not be touched because he was too smart to be implicated. And then he realized, no, actually I'm just as implicated, and so that could possibly account for why he now refuses to release the files. I guess you can respond to that, but I also then would ask, what is your read? What is the explanation for this 180 that Trump has done recently regarding the Epstein files?
I think it strains my credulity to think that he would be that totally ignorant and that everyone around him would be that totally ignorant to know, and he had made references to it in the past, to know what Epstein, the operation that he was running, the idea that he would have gone on account of Epstein providing these underage girls for him and that he would have sex with them, and then just somehow he would think that there was no evidence of it when that was the entire operation that Epstein was running. To me, totally strange credulity. And it also raises the question of why, if the Biden Justice Department had this information for 4 years that they could have released in a way that would damage Trump, fatally, politically damage Trump in the same way that releasing the files now putatively would if Trump was implicated, the idea that they wouldn't leak that out to a sympathetic corporate media that would gladly, they could just leak that out and nothing else in the files, and the media would run with it, and any questions to, well, what else is in there would easily be drowned out. And instead of having to try to convict Trump for some inadvertent campaign finance violation, they could have implicated him for raping underage children. That they didn't do that when they tried to pull all the other stops out against him. Again, that seems to me like it's Occam's butter knife, not Occam's razor. As far as why the about face, the 180, I think the simplest explanation is probably that he was told, was shown in no uncertain terms from his perspective, that he would be killed if he didn't go along, if he allowed these files to be released, because of what they potentially have to say about the implication of the entire Western intelligence structure post 1960, post the JFK assassination.
I just think there are other red lines that Trump has crossed before that would be just as important, just as earth-shattering. For instance, I'm thinking of Trump's refusal to toe the line on NATO. I think that idea, I guess if you think there are forces that can impose red lines even on somebody as much of a renegade as Trump, I think they would have done that, and we would have seen one like this. I guess what stands out about this Epstein thing is I don't recall ever seeing such a dramatic 180 on the part of Trump. And if that idea, it seems like there are just as important issues that powerful people would have been willing to threaten Trump's life over. I'm just wondering why this one issue is the red line. I guess you could say it is even more. It's the most important issue in the world, the one thing that they're willing to threaten Trump's life over?
Well, I don't think it's the one thing that they're willing to threaten Trump's life over. I guess that gets into the question of what happened at the Pennsylvania rally and if that was really a threat to Trump's life or not. But if you take the narrative as it seems to have occurred through the view of the broader public, that that was an attempt on his life, and this was prior to, or seemingly prior to, the Epstein blow up. But I think to get to the essence of it, it's not so much particular issues, but the process that's at risk here. So it's not outcomes, it's not the heads of the hydras, but this is like getting into the hydra's cardiovascular system and messing around with that. If they can or if it can be revealed the way that control is exerted on elites, all across the Western world to have those secret formulas revealed could potentially be far more damaging than any mostly theatrical arguments about NATO funding. It's not like NATO has actually lost any funding. Every single year, the budget for NATO has increased without exception for 65 years. And that chain of increased NATO funding was not broken in 2016 or 2017 or 2018, 2019, 2020, and it won't be in 24, 25, 26, 27, 28. And so I think those are mostly theatrical, cosmetic arguments, but this potentially is lifting the lid on the way that power is exerted.
Another question is, if we're taking the ticket taker theory, which briefly stated again is that this blackmail operation of powerful men being photographed or videoed, recorded with underage girls, and them willingly subjecting themselves to this in order to enter into the conspiracy. And if that's the case, it's hard to. It seems like number one, if that's, let's just take that is how the blackmail operation operated, and then you add Trump having a well-established long relationship with Jeffrey Epstein. It seems like it's hard to believe that Trump would not have been aware of this operation, and maybe if he had been aware of the operation, then he either agreed to be part of it or refused to.
I want to push back a little bit on the assertion that Trump and Epstein were bosom buddies. I think you could make the same argument, a stronger argument, for example, that Trump had a long, strong relationship with, say, the husband of his primary antagonist in the 2016 presidential election campaign. After all, Bill Clinton had a locker at Trump's golf course, and the Clintons were at Trump weddings, and Trump was at the Clinton weddings, and there's countless pictures of Trump and the Clintons together, and Trump donated to the Clintons multiple times throughout their political careers, and yet I think it's strange cruelty to say that they had a close relationship and that they were working together just because they had a business relationship. And for somebody like Jeffrey Epstein, who existed in the same geographical space that Trump did, for Trump to have interactions with him, I don't think that insinuates that he had some sort of special inside relationship with Jeffrey Epstein beyond the relationship that he had with so many other socialites and elites and celebrities during the era that he was judging the teenage beauty contestants. That was the era when he went on Howard Stern multiple times, and it's a little bit hard to understand now in the current year what the shock jock, the content of a Howard Stern show in the 90s was, but it would send off all kinds of on PC woke alarm bells today, where it wouldn't possibly be permitted in polite company, but in the 90s it was. And I can see Jeff kind of balking or being a little puzzled as to what I mean. I'm going to play a clip here of Howard Stern talking about how he wanted to have sex with the Olsen twins, who played the youngest child in the 1990s sitcom Full House.
Listen. To speak of them individually is when they turn 18, who you want to bang first.
Yeah, it was weird. I was reading this magazine.
Yeah, Mary Kate or Ashley.
Exactly.
Well, actually, Beth was reading a magazine. She goes, hey, did you see this? And I forget what magazine it is, but it's the Olsen twins hugging each other in a photo shoot, and they go, this is Howard Stern's fantasy.
You're kidding. What magazine did this?
I don't know. It was some magazine, and you know what, though? I don't really want to have sex with them anymore.
Me neither.
I don't know. They got kind of dwarfy looking.
Which one of them looks like a monkey?
Yeah, exactly. It's like something went wrong. Like they stopped growing or something.
They're not as hot as you thought they were going to be. No way.
It really looked for a while like when they were 13 or 14, they were going to be supermodels.
But then they stuck right there.
They kind of like didn't grow or something. It's weird, and I was counting down to their 18th birthday so we could have sex with them, but
Not everybody lives up to that. Like what's her face did? Alyssa Milano. She lived up to that. She got hot.
Someone told me she's really hairy though.
Who, Alyssa?
Got a belly hair and
really?
Yeah. Like you know,
Who
big.
told you that?
I don't know.
She's a guinea.
Yeah.
How dare you?
But the Olsen twins get that Hobbit-looking thing going, you know?
Right.
They live in Middle Earth.
So one of the points I'm trying to make here is that this was the most popular form of radio entertainment outside of political radio, like Rush Limbaugh. Howard Stern was the biggest shock jock voice in radio by far, and Trump, of course, was an entertainer himself and crossed paths with Howard Stern and, in fact, was on Howard Stern's show regularly. And so the sort of content here that was considered acceptable in the mainstream and laughed about was something that Trump was quite attuned to, but I don't think at all uniquely so.
So obviously we're operating on an extreme deficit of information, but I think that the broader questions I would want answered. Number one, was Jeffrey Epstein intelligence, meaning was he working for Mossad or some sort of intelligence agency? And as part of that operation, was he operating a blackmail ring? Then the next question, if he was operating a blackmail ring, what was the nature of it? Was it a situation where he, through various means, allowed or facilitated men unwillingly having sex with underage girls and then recorded or took pictures of that and used that as blackmail against them? Or was it the ticket-taking scenario where all of these men were aware of having sex with underage girls, but they were willingly implicating themselves? Or was it a combination of the two? And then lastly, I would want to know, was Trump aware of Epstein's ties to intelligence and the blackmail operation? And if he was aware of it, was he offered the opportunity to partake in that and he chose not to, or he chose to take part? Or was he simply unaware of any of it? And if he was unaware, what explains that ignorance?
The thing that would explain the lack of awareness, if he had it, is that he didn't have that close of a relationship with Epstein. I think if he had a really close bosom buddy relationship spanning decades, then it is really strange credulity to think he wouldn't have some idea of what was going on. And if he was a ticket taker, I don't think he would have, unless we really take a step back and entertain the idea that all of the seeming opposition to him in 2016 and in 2020 and in 2024, that was all theatrical too, because he is a ticket taker and he is effectively controlled opposition. And I don't think that's totally outside the realm of possibility, but I think it renders a lot of the other questions meaningless because it means all of the opposition to him or seeming opposition to him from the deep state wasn't genuine because they had an ability to destroy him at any time with this information that they could have selectively leaked but didn't.
I'm stuck on this supposed meeting that Pam Bondi had with Trump in May, where it was revealed that he was named in the Epstein files. I wonder if Trump maybe wasn't a ticket taker, didn't have sex with underage girls, but something was revealed to him about the consequences of divulging the Epstein files, and that his self-interest would be harmed in some way by the Epstein files being released. And so that is a possible explanation for the 180 Trump did on the Epstein files.
That it would hurt his self-interest more than this debacle of the handling has hurt his self-interest. If there's one thing he is good at doing, it is managing his public perception. And so to think that this would not reflect negatively on him, strange credulity. And there are other ways, if that were the case, that pushing harder and releasing the files whatever exactly that means, releasing that to the public. If that was deemed to be harmful to him, there are ways he could have done it that would have been less damaging politically. Instead of making a big show about talking about case closed, nothing to see here, there's no information we'll ever release to the public, it would have been much easier to do what he could have done at any time if he were implicated, or if he became aware of the fact that this could redound to his detriment rather than his benefit, where he could have just let it quietly go away, or talk about how additional information was going to be gathered and the Justice Department was going to continue to look into it, and then just not made mention of it for 6 months or 2 years. And then people would grumble about it some, but it wouldn't have near the salience that it does now. And so if he became aware of something and decided to do a 180 about face, something that he was unaware of for 6-7 years, and something that wouldn't have been brought to his attention when he was first making hay about this in the 2020 election, it seems to me just dropping it would have been a much more effective way to make it go away. And Trump, of course, is fantastic at being able to drive the narrative and constantly shift it from one thing to another. And so he's a master of being able to take something that he doesn't want to be in the spotlight away by making some seeming outrageous move in an entirely different direction. There's a lot of heavy speculation on our part here, obviously, as I'm fond of saying. This is all through a glass darkly. We can only see the outlines and the reactions of how people in power are responding to these events. But there is one way that this could be clarified at some point in the future, which is simply making public all of the documents surrounding the case.
Yes, we are in Plato's cave, and all we're seeing are the shadows on the wall.
But in that metaphor, it's been promised to us that there is video footage of what's happening outside of the cave, and we were all going to see it, and now we're not. So either that was just one big total fraud and there was never anything there, but even that doesn't make sense because there has been information that's been released that's been heavily redacted. So there seems to be something going on here that is not being made known to the public for whatever reason or variety of reasons. Before we wrap it up completely, apropos of not much, I want to cram this little factoid that I came across this week that is humorous to me and indicative of the tribalistic nature of partisan politics in the Western world. And that is a question in the Economist YouGov poll run this week that asked respondents how Trump's age was affecting his presidential duties. Specifically, do you think Donald Trump's age is having an effect on his ability to fulfill his duties as president? And the percentages of Harris voters who said his age is, quote, severely limit his ability to do the job, unquote, is 64%. And of course, the vast majority of that 64% would have 3 years ago totally balked at the idea that Biden was unfit to be president because of his age. That'll do it for us this week. Thanks for listening. We'll talk to you next time.